Live from WWL Louisiana, this is an Elections on 4 special.
Good evening and welcome to the 2025 debate for Orleans Parish Sheriff, hosted by WWL Louisiana. I'm Devin Bartolotta along with Brandon Walker, and we will be moderating tonight's debate.
The primary election is Saturday, October 11th. If no one wins 50% of the vote that night, then the top two candidates will head to a runoff election in November.
The candidates joining us for tonight's debate are incumbent Sheriff Susan Hutson, former NOPD Interim Superintendent Michelle Woodfork,
good evening,
and Second City Court Constable Edwin Shorty Jr.
Good evening.
Now, the rules here are fairly simple.
Now, each of these candidates did poll higher than 5% in our WWL Louisiana poll. And Brandon, you were going to talk about the rules.
Excuse me, I got ahead of myself. They are fairly simple here. Devin and I are going to be asking the questions tonight, and each candidate will have 1 minute to answer them. Now, if another candidate is called out by name during someone's response, then that person will get 30 seconds for rebuttal.
We will begin with an opening statement from each candidate. Sheriff Susan Hutson is first tonight. Sheriff Hutson.
Okay, thank you. And good evening. I'm Orleans Parish Sheriff Susan Hutson, number 1 on the ballot. Honored to be here tonight. We're going to talk about what really is going on in the Orleans Justice Center. I took an oath before God in this community to be a change maker in this jail, and that's exactly what I'm doing, and we're going to talk about that tonight. I've taken on everything that the city has thrown at me, and we've done it well. I made specific promises to this community, and I'm keeping all of them. Now, along the way, I've ruffled some feathers because not everybody wants to see change be made. And I'm never going to be a part of the political cliques in this city. But what I've done in 3 years is support our deputies so that to keep them safe and this community safe. I've also taken on Mardi Gras, taken on patrolling in the French Quarter, and also supporting the culture bearers of this community. And we're going to talk about what happened May 16th. But what I can tell you for sure is that no one can get out of that jail without inside help. The Sheriff Susan Hutson, the People's Sheriff, number 1 on the ballot.
Thank you, Sheriff Hutson. Next, we have Miss Michelle Woodfork.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Woodfork, and I'm a native New Orleanian, a 35-year law enforcement professional. I educated myself in the field of law enforcement. I received a bachelor's degree from Southern University at New Orleans and also a master's degree from Southern University at New Orleans in criminal justice with a concentration in law enforcement. And again, I'm a proven law enforcement leader. I served as a deputy sheriff. When I began my career, I moved on to a police officer and then ultimately the interim superintendent of the New Orleans Police Department. I serve with integrity and transparency and accountability. And I am the only candidate that has the knowledge, experience, and expertise to fix what's going on inside the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office. As your superintendent of police, I authored and implemented a strategic plan that got violent crime down 25%.
Thank you, Ms. Woodfork. Now, opening statements from Constable Edwin Shorty Jr.
Thank you. Again, my name is Edwin Shorty. I'm a native New Orleanian. Grew up in the lower 9th Ward. Went to Southern University at New Orleans. And while I was at Southern University at New Orleans, I worked in the jail in Templeman 1 and 2 all the way through college. After leaving Southern University in New Orleans with a business administration degree, I went to Southern University Law School. Finished in law school in 2002. And since then, I've owned my own law firm. One thing I can say is I think I'm the only individual up here who's run their own business. In 2012, I ran for and won to be constable of Second City Court. And if you recall, after Katrina, we merged the civil sheriff and the criminal sheriff. So part of my job is what the sheriff's office already does. We just do it for a different court. We handle evictions. We handle service of process. We handle the issuance of subpoenas. That is what we do every day. I also happen to serve on the board of my alma mater, Southern University, and I've served on that board since 2018. So I have a unique perspective on educational programs and workforce development programs that we can bring to bear at the jail.
Thank you, sir. We will now begin by asking each candidate one individual question, with 1 minute to respond, beginning with you, Sheriff Hutson. Sheriff Hutson, just in the last 4 months, the jail has experienced a historic jailbreak, a mistaken release of an inmate. You've also been held in contempt of court by criminal court judges, and as of this morning, the department is dealing with a cyber attack. What can you tell us about the cyber attack? And in light of these incidents, why should the public have confidence in your leadership?
First, I need to correct something you said. It was not a historic break. There were breaks in the 70s and 60s and 80s. 20 plus people got out. 28 one year, 21 another. I know that I met some of the people who broke out of the jail at that time. And at that time, they actually broke out of the jail and were not helped out of it like the people in May 16 were. That was a let out, not a breakout. And it was very curious on the timing as well. And we know that sheriff's offices are political agencies, and the actors in them, the employees in them, are also political. Now, I'm not sure why you're asking me about a cyber attack, as I did not attack the agency. That is something that happens all over. And what we did was be able to limit it, control it, and still be able to function in the jail and the courts and the clerk's office, because we feed all of those offices, and we were able to do that. We made our notices, and we're working with all the partners in the community, including the city and the state, to find out exactly what happened and to fix that.
Thank you, Sheriff Hutson. Now to Ms. Woodfork, a question for you. You have a few administrative complaints and allegations of domestic violence from your time with NOPD. In 2 of those cases, you were accused of lying to internal investigators. Why should voters trust that you'll be truthful in all instances going forward?
Those incidents happened over 22 years ago, and I was disciplined for them. I still today maintain my innocence in them. I took those particular incidents and I used them as a teaching tool to mentor and train people who work with me and for me. And it did not deter me from moving from a police officer to sergeant, being promoted from sergeant to lieutenant, and then lieutenant to captain, and then ultimately serving as the chief of police for the New Orleans Police Department and doing it successfully. And so if we can talk about those things, but I still maintain my innocence. They're public record. I have been transparent about them, and I have acted with integrity. You've seen the latest things that have come out. I'm always going to do the right thing. Always. It was the way I was raised. Even when it costs me, I'm going to do the right thing. And so I think the people can trust me.
Thank you, Ms. Woodfork. Constable Shorty.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, you are the only major candidate in this race who has not run a major department. The Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office is more than 20 times the size of your current staff as Second City Court Constable. What specifically qualifies you to run a department of this size and scale of the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office?
I've been a practicing lawyer for more than 20 years. In that time, I've managed my law practice well. I've run the constable's office for a number of years, for more than 12 years. The constable's office is unique in government circles because I don't get any funding from the state or from the city. So it is a self-generated office, just like it's almost akin to a private business. And I think what I've shown by my management of that office is the ability to understand the numbers and how we work to make something viable and effective without getting a lot of support from other government agencies. What I think I also bring to bear is a unique perspective in that I've done a number of these jobs. I have handled evictions myself. I've handled foreclosures myself. I've worked in the jail. I've managed a law enforcement agency. And as a practicing lawyer, I understand the impact that not getting documents served timely has on civil litigation and on criminal litigation. So I bring a unique perspective, understanding every component of what happens at the sheriff's office.
Thank you, sir.
All right, this will be a question for both of you here. Or all 3 of you here.
All right, okay. So now this question here, and we're going to modify it just a little bit. We have it specifically for Sheriff Hutson, and then we'll get to Ms. Woodfork and Constable Shorty here. In an interview with WWL Louisiana on August 8th, Sheriff Hutson suggested May's jailbreak was politically motivated, saying she found the timing of the escape, quote, to be very curious. For you, Sheriff Hutson, what evidence do you have to support that it is politically motivated? And for Ms. Woodfork and Constable Shorty, how would you have handled this investigation if you were sheriff at the time of the jailbreak? Again, beginning with Sheriff Hutson.
Yeah, thank you. First, what I know about it is it doesn't occur until after the millage vote gets done. Very curious timing. No one has been able to get out of this jail because you cannot get out of this jail without internal help. It's not happened. This is different than the jails they worked in which people could run out the doors, go to Bourbon Street and all these types of things and come back. It's not possible to do that in this particular jail. And so we know that it was done at this particular time, and it was intentional. Now, I can't compromise the investigation, but what we do know is that the evidence that we're collecting right now is showing that there was some complicity by our own employees in that, and that there's been other sabotage incidents going on in the jail. I do anticipate there will be arrests, hopefully soon, but we do have to meet that burden of proof. But we know that there were actors doing this to influence this investigation, to influence the election.
Thank you. Ms. Woodfork.
Again, I think it's disingenuous to suggest that this is a political action. This is mismanagement. This is poor leadership. And had the issues have been addressed proactively, I don't think this jailbreak would have occurred. And how I would have handled it is I would have been very transparent with the public and did it in a timely fashion. Letting the elected officials know, letting the public know, letting the media know exactly what happened at the jail, and being very transparent about it and taking accountability for it. When you are elected as the sheriff, you or the person that has to take accountability for everything that goes on inside that agency. And so to suggest that it was political for me personally, and I'm not sure about other candidates, it felt like she suggested that one of us had something to do with it. And that is, to me, that's suggesting that we would do something criminal, and that's truly disrespectful.
I'm going to give the sheriff just 30 seconds to respond to that claim.
If you're feeling guilty, that's on you. And that has to do with your own past and your lying to investigators and your own record. But what we do know about this particular incident is that we know there were actors in the system doing things that they should not have been doing. And what we did is, I don't know how more transparent I can be when I put out the actual video of what goes on and photos of what goes on in what went on in that particular cell. So we've been very transparent about it, and we're going to continue to investigate, and we're going to hold everyone accountable.
Constable Shorty.
Leadership is about taking responsibility. You take responsibility for the bad things, you share the good things with your staff. And we still are talking about inmates scheduling a jailbreak for an election cycle. That doesn't make any sense. The public knows that doesn't make any sense. What the sheriff should have done is notify all of the partners in law enforcement immediately, not wait for 2.5 hours. Everyone should have been able to look at your news station and see the photographs of these inmates immediately so they know who they were looking for. The DA's office should have been notified immediately. The New Orleans Police Department, the Louisiana State Police. Everyone should have known exactly who these folks were, what time they broke out, and had that information so that they can try and recapture them as quickly as possible. Notification of victims should have happened immediately. You've been victimized. We asked you to come to court. We asked you to testify. Something happens, and we ask you to step up. These folks stepped up, and they weren't notified timely by the sheriff's office.
Thank you, sir. Real quick, Sheriff, anything you want to say just about the timing here and those allegations?
Part-time constable, part-time lawyer, jack of all trades, master of none, and doesn't know anything about how this operates. At 9 o'clock, I found out before 9:30, I was clear that we had given it to the task forces. All of law enforcement, except you, are on that, and we're able to get that information. So it went out. And then our victim services, as we said that day at the press conference, reached out to the victims. We were even worried about one of the victims and the way she sounded, and we sent police to her house. So we did reach out to protect our victims, who we deal with every day.
Sheriff Hutson, thank you. That wraps it up for the individual questions. So in this upcoming section, each candidate will respond to each question that we ask. And our first question. This week, President Donald Trump suggested he's considering deploying National Guard troops in New Orleans to help fight crime. As a member of the law enforcement community and of city leadership, would you welcome a military presence of this nature in New Orleans? And we'll begin with Ms. Woodfork.
Earlier today, I heard our Chief Kirkpatrick say how crime is going down, gave those numbers, talked about Golden Eagle, and but also welcoming partners, any type of partners, our federal partners, our state partners, and our local partners. We always want partnerships, right? And so I think that it needs to be a conversation to see that we really need that kind of presence here in New Orleans. And not to say that we don't welcome, of course, they're servicemen, right? They came here, they helped us during Hurricane Katrina. We support them. There are many who are in law enforcement who are in the National Guard. And so they are already truly our partners on the job. So I think that we just have to examine whether we really need the National Guard here. Is it needed somewhere else or in some? But we never want to say no to partnerships. We want to talk about it, have conversations about it, and see if we really need it.
Ms. Woodfork, thank you. We'll next go to Constable Shorty.
Look, I think there have been a number of reports to show that National Guard troops don't want to do this kind of work. It interferes with morale, and it's not good for the population. You've got law enforcement in town to do certain things, and National Guard troops are not trained law enforcement officers. But I do want to go back to something that the sheriff's office said, and she wants to call out other folks about their misstatements. What she said was a misstatement. The New Orleans Police Department will tell you they were not informed timely of this incident, of the jailbreak. The DA's office will tell you that they were not informed timely of this incident. Several hours later is not timely. The criminal court judges who had pending cases involving the individuals, the murderers who escaped, were not notified timely. So to stand here and then say that we notified people timely is disingenuous. And we can't let folks get away with telling those kind of misstatements openly to the news.
Constable Shorty, thank you. I do want to keep it on this question, but in the spirit of fairness and going back to our rules, about 30 seconds to rebut. Sheriff Hutson, would you like to revisit the timing issue, or should we move on to your answer for this question?
I think it was clear. We notified all law enforcement and those who work on this task force, which includes almost everyone in this whole area.
Okay, I will ask you then to answer this question. As a member of law enforcement and city leadership, would you welcome a military presence like Donald Trump is talking about in New Orleans?
You know, I think I agree with all of our other elected officials who said, look, we can use this money right here. Our deputies make $18.50 an hour to start. So if we're going to spend all this funding on federal law enforcement who make much more than that and bring them in, that's a slap in the face to our deputies who have taken on everything the city has asked them to do, from an overcrowded jail to working Mardi Gras to working in the French Quarter and their off time, and to supporting culture every weekend in this city, which is what we do. So I think that funding should go to us, and so that we can beef up our ranks. And I only have enough deputies for about 800 people, and we got 1,400 people in the jail. We need to beef up the ranks right here at OPSO and take care of our city ourselves.
Thank you. Well, the night 10 inmates escaped the Orleans Justice Center. The sheriff's office reported that there were 36 staff members responsible for securing roughly 1,400 inmates. Also, the department said that no deputy was physically on the pod from which the inmates escaped. What is your plan to recruit deputies in a jail that's been chronically understaffed, beginning with Constable Shorty?
I would reinstitute a program that was there when I worked there, which was a college student program, which allowed me to work my way through undergrad. And I think you bring that program back and reach out to colleges in the metro New Orleans area. I think you also bring back the About Face program that had individuals who were stationed here at Marine Forces Reserve and Belle Chase Naval Air Station also work on a part-time basis because they've got basic training. They then get corrections officer training. But part of the problem is retention. If the focus of the sheriff's office is on quality of life for inmates and not on the quality of life of the deputies, no one's going to work there. They're not going to feel safe. You've got to first beef up the workforce. And once you've beefed up the workforce, then you can talk about other issues that relate to services that the sheriff's office can bring. But when you reinstitute college student program and you reinstitute About Face program and talk about some flex scheduling, because it's a 12-hour shift. So if you go in and say,
thank you, sir.
Sorry.
Sheriff Hutson.
Yeah, like I said before, Constable Shorty is a part-time lawyer. But if he had read the consent judgment, he'd know that you have to, it's not like in the old days when it was 4 times the death rate in the jail. Violence was way bigger than what's going on right now. And we were on our way to a consent judgment in those time period. But now everybody who's going to work in the Orleans Justice Center has to have 92 hours of training. That's post-level 3. They have to have an additional 30 hours of training about sexual assault and other consent decree related matters. So You're going to have to train them all first before these students can come in and do that. And the same thing for the military. So they're not just going to walk in there like that. And so what we need to do is continue to beef them up. I fought for raises. We've gotten them up from $15.50 an hour when I got into office. And they hadn't had a raise in 5 years when I fought for our deputies to get these raises. But we need to get to the national average, which is $24 an hour. And that's a great start. Because you know what? I have to compete with other agencies who are paying better, including NOPD, who also get retention bonuses.
Thank you, Sheriff Hutson. Ms. Woodfork.
As an interim superintendent of the New Orleans Police Department and in my strategic plan, it addressed recruitment and retention. And we managed to hire 105 new police recruits and 104 civilian employees. And we did that by having a robust recruitment effort. We had a recruitment team, and that team focused on going to having job fairs, actually giving tests for people to be hired right then. And you have to be creative, but you also have to create partnerships with people like the NOPDJF, the New Orleans Police and Justice Foundation, to assist you in trying to get that recruiting effort up. And you have to cast your net a little bit wider. You know, we all know that hiring law enforcement right now is very, very difficult. So you have to be creative, offer incentives, offer upward mobility inside the agency, change the culture inside this agency. It should be seen as a career and not a stepping stone.
Thank you, ma'am. We're going to give you a chance to answer the question, but first, if you'd like to respond to the claim that you're a part-time lawyer.
Yes. So in my 20-some years of practicing law, I've handled criminal and civil jury trials. I represented individuals involved in the Danziger police shooting. I've handled thousands of bankruptcies and saved a number of individuals from losing their home. So I don't know why we would discount that experience, but that experience makes me the most qualified individual up here to be the sheriff. I understand how it all works, not just the jail, but the components that we're failing at every day, getting folks served timely, handling our evictions.
Thank you. Because we did have you answer that question first, we're going to go to our next question, and that is regarding safety. So safety for both inmates and deputies remains a top concern within the Orleans Justice Center. In July, the sheriff's office confirmed an inmate assaulted a deputy who needed medical treatment as a result. Attacks among inmates have also increased within the facility. With understaffing and overcrowding at critical levels and knowledge of prior warnings from federal monitors that high-risk violent inmates were not being properly kept separate from other inmates, what will you do to improve safety on day one? And this begins with Sheriff Hutson.
Yeah, so as I've said, the first thing we did was start looking at this population and trying to get this justice system to move faster. We were at 1,600 at one point. And again, I tell you, we have deputies enough for 800 maybe. So 2 times that population of what we can handle. And it went up 70% since I've been in office. But I trust the men and women of this department. I'm grateful for all their efforts to keep it safe here. But here's the real story. Every day, because these people, most of these folks are pre-trial. Every day we serve 4,000 meals. We take the entire population in the jail and a half to court every day. Specialty appointments for a sick population, medical and mental health care. All of these things compete with deputies on the pod as well. And they're all a constitutional right because people are pre-trial. These folks have not had to experience that, neither one. And this is the work of OPSO. And without having a proper pay plan and salaries for deputies, we're going to continue to be understaffed.
Sheriff Hutson, thank you. Ms. Woodfork?
The sheriff says that we don't know anything about it, or I'm going to take from me that we don't know anything about this. What I do know is that when I was appointed as interim superintendent, we were known as the murder capital of the nation. And I had to not only manage a police department, but recruit and retain the people that I had. And what we did is like I said in my last statement, you have to change the culture, right? You have to offer incentives. You have to care about your people. You have to care about the people that work for you. And the way to do that is to make sure they get not just a living wage, but a thriving wage. These people may want to buy a home or or send their kids to college. So you have to champion for those people that work for you. And the way to do that is incentives, being fair to them, giving promotions fairly inside the agency, getting them the training and the tools that they need to make the jail safe, and definitely having enough staffing inside that agency so jailbreak or this constant corruption and stuff won't continue.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Woodfork. Constable Shorty?
It's going to continue to be overcrowded if you don't bring the inmates to court timely. And that's one of the main problems that we've seen in recent court hearings. You take your reserve deputies, you bring your reserve deputies over and make sure that inmates are brought to court. That's why you've got a backlog. Some of the backlog in court is due to the sheriff not timely bringing inmates over. So that's one way to reduce your population, because if the court moves timely, then individuals either get sentenced or sent home and they're moved out of your facility. So that's one thing that you can do. We've talked about recruitment. If you're recruiting individuals, if you're beefing up the workforce, then it makes it safer. But one of the things that you've got to do is you've got to rebook individuals, recharge them with criminal charges if they injure a deputy. They've got to get additional charges and face time for hurting any deputy that you've got in your facility. And that is a non-starter. It can't be that we're so concerned about our residents that we're not taking care of our deputies.
Thank you, Constable Shorty.
Address that.
We'll give you a couple seconds to address
Yes.
that.
Yeah, because it's absolutely inaccurate. The issue at the court was weekend court. We're the only parish in the state that does weekend court. We have 2 courtrooms in the jail where not the magistrate, but the commissioners can come over and do court in the jail. And that's what they do everywhere else in this state. We're the only ones doing weekend court. Every month, we take the entire population of the jail and a half to court. That is inaccurate and incorrect. Again, part-time lawyer, not really knowing what's going on.
Just inaccurate, Sandra.
Sure thing. We'll give you 30 seconds.
We've been doing this since 1974. New Orleans has had magistrate court and evening and weekend court since 1974. It isn't until this administration that we've been unable to do it. And I don't know why we're focusing on what other parishes are doing. We've got a high volume, high capacity situation in our criminal court. We should be able to do this. If you've got the manpower to put up tents, then you've definitely got the manpower to make sure folks get to court timely.
Deputies don't put up tents. And it takes more manpower to run the courthouse. It's less manpower to have it over at the jail. That's just common sense.
All right, thank you. We do want to move on just in the interest of time. Thank you for your responses there. Now, in this segment, we will allow each candidate to ask a question of the other candidate. The same rules are going to apply here for this section for rebuttals. We're going to begin with Ms. Woodfork.
Do I get to choose which one?
You get to choose one candidate,
Okay.
any candidate, and ask your question.
Okay, I will choose Constable Shorty. Your job is to evict people from their homes. What other law enforcement experience do you have, and when did you get it?
The job's more than evicting people from their homes. The job entails making sure that all of the civil service of summons are released out timely and making sure that court dates are kept timely. So pretty much my entire force is post-certified. I do the post-training with them to keep up their annual certificates and make sure that they're in compliance. That is what I do all of the time. But I think we discount the importance of what I do. And until you've been in a domestic case or you've been in a personal injury case or any type of litigation and you've gotten to court and you've paid your lawyer and you're sitting there thinking your matter is going to get dealt with, and then you're told, oh no, your matter's not getting dealt with today because it wasn't served timely, then you can discount what I do. But there are a lot of people who deal with the matters that who are involved in what happens in my courthouse every day. And it's something very serious to make sure that your court date doesn't get pushed off, because just like the folks who are in criminal court, what happens when you can't get access to the court timely?
Thank you, Constable Shorty, and we will stay with you now. You get to ask one question of one of your fellow competitors.
Ms. Woodfork, why did you have such a backlog in the sex crimes unit during your tenure over there?
As you know, that backlog was there before I became the superintendent of police. We didn't get the opportunity to hire more than 950 officers at the time when I was the superintendent. So we were working towards beefing up our sex crimes unit. And so it takes time. Every agency in this country has a staffing crisis, right? They're trying to hire folks. And so the backlog is, it was a backlog of cases because, of course, you didn't have enough detectives. So if you don't have enough detectives, there are going to be some cases that are backlog. But also you have the other parts of the criminal justice system that we have to deal with. Have to go through the DA's office, has to go through the courts. And so that's how those cases could get backlogged. But the people that work in that particular section, they work very hard.
Thank you, ma'am. Sheriff Hutson.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Michelle Woodfork. You've said that you authored the plan that caused crime to fall. But isn't it true that it was a record number of crime the year before because of the pandemic, and you only continued the same plan that Chief Ferguson had put in place and what was put in place by the NOLA Coalition, as reported by the Times-Picayune?
That is absolutely unequivocally not true. I even still have the notebooks from when I was doing my drafts on my own and meeting with my executive team when I authored my own plan. And if you go on the internet right now and you Google strategic plan, NOPD strategic plan, mine is going to come up. I have the emails back and forth for somebody to correct anything that had to proofread it and if I had any misspellings or run-on sentences and stuff like that, going back and forth to make sure that this plan was solid and it looked good. So I actually did author this plan. I wrote it with ideas that I got from my team and from myself. And I put it together and it worked. It got crime down 25%. It lowered carjackings down 45%. We tripled officer recruitment. And they're still using that plan today because Ann Kirkpatrick is such a smart woman. She said, why fix something that's not broken? I'm going to continue to use the plan that Michelle Woodfork put in place.
All right, this next one is going to move a little faster. We are going on to our rapid fire segment, and each of you will respond with just yes or no to a series of questions. Our first question for rapid fire, yes or no. Some argue that artificial intelligence can make the criminal justice system more efficient and fair, while others worry it could deepen bias and erode public trust. As sheriff, would you embrace AI-driven policing tools? And we'll go down the line, beginning with Constable Shorty.
Yes.
Sheriff Hutson.
Yes.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Next question. In 2022, the Sheriff's Office said it would begin issuing weekly incident reports to keep the public informed of things like contraband, misconduct, staffing shortages, and altercations inside the Orleans Justice Center. But a report of this nature has not been issued since November of last year. So will you commit to issuing weekly incident reports, beginning with Sheriff Hutson?
Yeah, and we're the only one in the country doing that.
Ms. Woodfork?
Yes.
Yes.
Shorty. Thank you.
Our next question. In 2024, the Louisiana legislature repealed a law which once restricted the release of mugshots of nonviolent offenders. As sheriff, would you return to the previous practice of making inmate mugshots available on the sheriff's office website? And we begin with Ms. Woodfork.
Yes.
Sorry, repeat it.
Would you return to the previous practice of making inmate mugshots available on the sheriff's office website? And Constable Shorty.
Yes.
And Sheriff Hutson.
In some instances.
All right, thank you for that. Now we're going to get back to our longer questions here. And again, just to refresh, each candidate will have 1 minute to answer their questions. We will continue now. The New Orleans Sheriff's Office, the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office, has a long-standing immigration policy developed under the consent decree, which prohibits deputies from directly investigating immigration violations or honoring most detention requests for ICE within the jail. However, this policy conflicts with state law banning so-called sanctuary cities in Louisiana. Do you stand with the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office's current policy or with state law that seeks to dissolve it, beginning with Constable Shorty?
Obviously, when we've got a conflict in the law, we have to do what's paramount to protecting our citizens. And if we're talking about individuals who have got serious crimes, then look, we've got to work with our federal partners to make sure that those individuals are not released on our streets. There's a conflict, and we've got to work with our state legislators and council to deal with the consent decree so that everyone has a clear understanding of what the sheriff's office role and responsibility is. Do I want to be able to work with our federal partners? Yes. I'm going to follow the law to the law to the T. But as you pointed out, with a conflict, We've got to have either the federal court or our state legislators or our city council rework what they've got and realize that they've got a conflict, and you're putting law enforcement in a bind by not clearly stating what we can and can't do. But the answer is yes, I'm going to work with our federal partners.
Thank you, sir. Sheriff Hutson.
Yeah, we will work with the law. So the first thing is we're going to do is follow the law. As a lawyer, I know that federal law and constitutional law trump state law. This consent judgment is in place, and it was put in place because the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office, under a prior sheriff, were holding people too long, and the people of this parish had to pay out hundreds of thousands of dollars because of that. The judgment requires us to hold people for rape, robbery, kidnapping, murder, and treason. And that's a good middle ground, because you're getting people who are wanted for the most serious crimes. The people of Orleans Parish should not be paying over $50,000 a year to house people for traffic tickets or low-level misdemeanors and immigration violations. So I think that's too much. I think where it is at right now is where we need to stay. If that consent judgment goes away, we will follow state law. But until then, the Constitution trumps.
Thank you. Ms. Woodfork.
As a law enforcement professional, I know that if you take an oath, you have to follow the law, whether that be local, state, or federal law. Of course, federal law trumps state and local laws, right? In this consent decree that the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office is under, in there, it was implemented in 2013. So, of course, the current laws are in conflict with the provision inside of there. And so that is not the main job of the sheriff. The sheriff's job is to care, custody, and control of the jail. But am I going to partner with my federal partners? Absolutely. Am I going to follow the law? That's exactly what I'm going to do, because I am a law enforcement officer. I'm going to leave it to the legal experts and the courts to figure out what exactly the law is. And it does put us in a bind. It puts law enforcement in a bind when you have something like this. So again, leaving it to the legal experts and the courts to figure out so we can follow the law that is going to come out of the litigation going on with it.
Thank you, Ms. Woodfork. The Orleans Parish Jail Population Report for the month of July placed the daily average number of people detained at the facility at 1,446 people. That is a 4.6% increase from June's daily average, and it is well over the inmate limit that was set by City Council. While we are awaiting the August report, overcrowding is a concern that challenged both the current and previous administrations at the Orleans Justice Center. What will you do to fix overcrowding at the jail? And we begin with Sheriff Hutson.
Yeah, so I'm going to continue to do what I've done, which is, number one, we created a jail population management unit to drill down on the numbers and see who's there and why they're there. If we have people there for mostly misdemeanors, then we can talk to the police department about more summonses. If it's about people being reset over and over again, we can talk to the district attorney, the courts, and the public defender about being more speedy in getting folks to trial. We have some people who've been in our custody 9 years, 5 years. And on average, it takes about 2 years for folks to get to trial. That's problematic for an understaffed and overpopulated jail. So we're going to continue to drill down on those numbers. And we're going to, at some point, we're going to have to ask for some relief from our federal court and our consent judgment if we're not able to get actors in the system to operate more efficiently and to move people along more quickly. The courts are fully open, and we've been able to get, again, the population of the jail and a half to court every month. There's no reason that this shouldn't move.
Sheriff Hutson, thank you. Ms. Woodfork, your thoughts on overcrowding at the jail?
I think it's absolutely necessary to address jail population, to get it down to those numbers where this jail is functional. And in order to do that, you have to have a relationship and create a collaboration with your other partners inside the criminal justice system. That's the police department, that's the DA's office, the courts, and the clerk's office. It needs to be a conversation on how we can forward the wheels of justice quicker. We can think about letting those out who are that are committing low-level crimes, but just cannot afford $100 bail that they're under or whatever. Start talking about ways to let those people out and do some community service or different things like that until it's their time in court. But more importantly, you definitely have to address the fact of how are you going to make sure that it's safe inside this jail because of the population. You're talking 1,450.
Ms. Woodfork, thank you. Constable Shorty.
Look, we're not having a real conversation about this, and we've got to sit down with the council at some point and say, you've come up with this arbitrary number of 1,300. Sheriff's office isn't the main arresting agency. The New Orleans Police Department is. You've got more inmates than you've got bed space. You need more bed space. Because we can blithely and cavalierly talk about releasing low-level offenders, but the majority of people are not necessarily traffic offenders or individuals who are just there because they've got a drug addiction problem. You don't necessarily want somebody who's committed a simple battery on you getting a summons so that they can come back and commit another simple battery on you. Once we have additional bed space, then I think you're going to deal with your overcrowding problem in a better way. I don't have a problem with saying for individuals who've got substance abuse problems or nonviolent offenders, we're going to release them for overcrowding. But the idea that the majority of people are there on simple issues is just false. We've got to have the bed space to keep violent folks off of our streets.
Thank you, Constable Shorty.
Thank you. Sheriff Hutson has said that the jail needs more money to solve some of the problems that led to the jailbreak. But the city council has argued that it doesn't know what the sheriff is doing with the money the department has because members can only see high-level reports, they say. They do not have access to view specific expenses, staff salaries, or contract costs. To each of the candidates, will you commit to using the city's BRASS system, the accounting program there, so that the council can see the department's expenses or provide a line-by-line breakdown of the budget? And if not, why? Beginning with Ms. Woodfork.
Absolutely, I would use the BRASS system. It affords you accountability, transparency. You know, you don't only take an oath for the care, custody, and control of the jail when you become the sheriff. You say, hey, I'm going to be a good steward of taxpayer dollars. And how do you do that? You show them exactly how you're spending their money. And the BRASS system is transparent. You can see what vendors, what contractors are being used. What you have to do is register with the city as a vendor or a contractor and then go through the bidding process. And that is the most transparent thing that you can do, right? You can see exactly who those vendors are, exactly where every dime and dollar is being spent when it comes to contracts with the sheriff's office. And I have no problem using that system. I think it's a very transparent transaction. And if it doesn't work for the sheriff's office, find a system just like it. People need to know in real time how their tax dollars are being spent.
Thank you, ma'am. Constable Shorty.
I think we can really take a hard look at BRASS and see if it works. But a lot of times we talk about transparency relative to the current sheriff's administration, and I don't think transparency is the issue. Competency is the issue. What are we doing with the money? If the way you tried to sell a tax increase to the citizens of the city of New Orleans is I want to have tablets for inmates to entertain them, then we see what you're doing. It's not necessarily that it's not transparent. We don't like what you're doing. If the issue is I want to pass a tax to do certain I think one of the sales pitches was, I want to make the jail suicide proof. And folks are going, well, now you're talking about whether or not you're going to pay deputies more. Well, if you're trying to sell a tax to pay deputies more, sell that tax. We see what's going on. When they had a water problem, the legislative auditor was able to say, you've got money, spend this money. So there's transparency there. There's incompetency there.
Thank you. And Sheriff Hutson, I'm going to give you a second just to respond if you would like to the claim that competency is the issue. Specifically, what are we doing with the money?
Competency is the issue about Constable Shorty. Like I said, part-time lawyer. If he had read the consent judgment, and he is a lawyer, he would have seen that in there is an actual court order from the judge that says very clearly the city is responsible for deputy salaries and for a pay plan. And the sheriff cannot unilaterally up salaries. It is the law. The competency is not on my part. The incompetency is not on my part. It's on the constable's part. Now
I'll let you answer the question.
Can you repeat
Yes,
the question,
ma'am.
please?
So again, the question is to each of the candidates, will you commit to using the city's BRASS system so the council can see the department's expenses or provide a line-by-line breakdown of the budget, and if not, why?
Yeah, that's a false narrative. So the first thing that the community needs to know is that right now, the CAO's office, the city of New Orleans, has a username and password to our current system so they can see anything. We have to give them information every month about our expenditures. Payroll is our biggest expenditure, and we have to show them that. All contracts are subject to public records. You've been able to get them in the media Why is the city saying they can't see that? It's all public record. I put out an RFP for our new financial system because our current system is from the 1980s. That's the problem. It's an old, bulky system. So we're moving to a new one because it's end of life. We put out an RFP and the brass folks can bid on it as well. But the problem is they don't meet jail's requirements. We have to also track those in our custody and their accounts. We also have to track their commissary. There's a number of financial issues that have to be taken care of by brass, which it doesn't do right now. And I'm going to tell you this. I talked to some members of the community who asked me about it, and I say, go on brass and see if you can find out whatever you're looking for. They couldn't do it.
Thank you, Sheriff. And before we move on to the next question, do you want to respond?
Yes, I do. Look, the sheriff constantly talks about the consent decree as why she can't do something. I have read the consent decree, and reporting requirements are what the consent decree talks about. If the sheriff was so serious about deputy pay increases, then that's what she would have tried to sell the citizens on when she asked for a tax increase. You didn't hear anything about taxing deputy pay when she asked for the renewal. You didn't hear anything about deputy pay when she asked for the tax increase a few years ago. So that's a false narrative.
Thank you. Sheriff, anything?
The law is very clear. The city council has to approve the pay scale and the raises. It's just the law. I can't do that myself.
Sheriff Hutson, thank you. Our next question. More than 80% of people who leave the Orleans Justice Center are rearrested. That recidivism rate is higher than the national average. And as a result of rearrest, bonds are often set higher, meaning those inmates are in jail longer than the national average. And all of this, we know, contributes to the overcrowding problem. So what is your plan to help break the cycle of reincarceration in New Orleans? And we'll begin with Constable Shorty.
We've got to have real workforce development programs. We've got to have inmates cleaning up, picking up trash in our city, tearing down blighted property, cleaning out storm drains, and then they're trained, and you can go back to the community and say, look, they've done their sentence, they've worked, we've got them some skills, whether that be construction or demolition, driving trucks to clean storm drains or whatever, and you pair that with educational programs, and then you can go to the community and say, I need you to hire this person. Because then the community can say, okay, they've got a skill. But without any real skills, then that person is going to commit another crime and go back to jail. You want to offer everything available to those individuals who will apply themselves and want to change the trajectory of their lives. And that's good, and the community will embrace that. But if they're just going to sit there in custody all the time and just watch television, then they're not going to get any skills. And when they're released, they're going to commit another crime and come right back.
Constable Shorty, thank you. Sheriff Hutson?
Yeah, my opponents can only talk about what they may do, but I'm going to talk about what I am actually doing right now, and it's working. Because our preliminary data shows that the 4 years before I got into office, people had been arrested on average close to 8 times. In the 3 years since I've been there, that has fallen to a little over 3. So what we're doing inside the jail is working because we're dealing with the root causes of crime. If I know that mental health, addiction, and trauma are what gets people into the jail, I have to treat that. And we do that. And then we give them all the other things that they need. We survey our population, and we see that many have not even graduated from high school. They didn't go to school out there. So we have the Orleans Parish School Board in there, Travis Hill School. You can get a high set or a GED. But I went to a graduation yesterday for 15 people who got their OSHA cards. So now they can go and talk to the longshoremen and go work there. They can go to a plant and work there when they get out. So we're giving real solutions to real people to help them make a living the right way instead of what got them in there in the first place.
Sheriff Hutson, thank you. Ms. Woodfork?
I think in order for people to be successful and not go back out in our community and commit the same crimes, but even more serious crimes, we have to address them when they first get in the facility, at the intake. We have to have behavioral specialists, mental health specialists, and give them individualized plans. Start from the very beginning that are rooted in evidence-based programs that address education, that address substance abuse, that address mental illness, that address job training, homelessness. We have to give people those second and third chances and making sure, and you know, our sheriff says that they're already doing that, but the recidivism rate at OJC is 83%. So obviously those programs aren't working. They have to be evidence-based, and you have to follow that. You got to follow the data. You have to make sure that you're following the data on these programs and making sure they're working. Because if they're not working, you have to move on and get those programs that do work for people so they can have those second and third chances.
Ms. Woodfork, thank you. All right, we are approaching the close of tonight's debate. And in this final segment, we want to give all three of you some time to make closing remarks.
Yeah, you'll each have 90 seconds to speak directly to voters here. We're going to begin right now with Constable Edwin Shorty.
My name is Edwin Shorty. I'm number 5 on your ballot. I'm the only person up here who's handled an eviction. I'm the only person up here who understands how the foreclosure process works. I'm the only person up here who's practiced law. Aside from part-time lawyering, I do practice law. And I understand what it means to individual litigants when their paperwork isn't served timely and how that wastes money. I understand how criminal litigants can end up in court and have not been served, and now victims' times are wasted, the judge's time is wasted, and the individual defendant's time is wasted. I understand what the jail life is like. I've worked in the jail. I worked my way through undergrad in the jail, so I get that process. This is about management. This is about the care, feeding, and custody of these individuals every day. This is about bringing real educational programs and workforce development programs. I'm on the board of an HBCU. I understand what educational programs we could bring to bear. That's how you change the trajectory of these individuals' lives. Not just saying I'm going to give them a GDE, but I'm going to give them some kind of skills so when they come out, they're marketable and you can help them get a job. But we're not going to release anyone, and we're not going to get buy-in from our community till they feel that the jail is safe, until they know no one else is running out the front door of the jail. They're not going to be victimized by these individuals again. And that's how you get the community to rally around and make sure when you successfully complete programs that these individuals can get hired.
Thank you, sir. Sheriff Hutson.
Yeah. Again, my opponent, part-time lawyer, part-time constable, but can't tell the full truth up out here. This particular constable also has been disciplined by the bar because he did not take care of his clients and he did not follow the law. And he's not telling the truth. I also practiced law as well before I ran for sheriff. He was part of a car wreck scheme, and he was doing that for a year before he found out his clients had a car wreck scheme, and he was the lawyer on the case. They went to federal prison. I met 2 of his clients this weekend who talked about how he had messed up a bankruptcy and had hurt a 78-year-old woman, and she lost her house as a result of his lawyering. We do 20 times the work of the constable. I have way more employees. We serve 32,000 papers per year, 1,000 TROs. We do much more work than him. It is not even close. Michelle Woodfork, we talked about her disciplinary history, domestic violence, lying, insubordination. But also when she was in office, the consent decree monitor said that the New Orleans Police Department was backsliding. And so their numbers, the way they were coding calls, which was incorrect, and they were downplaying calls on her watch. Also, the satisfaction in the NOPD went down while it was also under her watch. So they're talking as if they were the most successful people in the world. That's not true. But what I've done is take on the hardest job in this city. We've been successful at getting people to better places. And yes, there are going to be issues in a jail.
Constable Shorty, I will give you a chance to reply, but we're going to go to Ms. Woodfork, and you'll have a chance to reply as well to those comments, ma'am.
Again, my name is Michelle Woodfork. I am a 35-year law enforcement professional, and I have worked inside the sheriff's. I've actually worked inside the sheriff's office, not like my opponent, Ms. Hutson. I have been a law enforcement professional for over 35 years, and I'm proving, when given the opportunity and the chance, in 10 months, I did what some chiefs have not done in 4 years. I ran an agency of over 1,250 people with a budget of $166 million and was successful at it. We were fiscally sound. We got the things that we needed because we collaborated and created partnerships with the council. We didn't argue with them. We didn't tell them, you got to pay. You got to give us the money. And although it is the law, it's the way that you do it. You compromise. You create working relationships, not arguments with the council. That's how you get things done. You go to them with a detailed budget, not the things that you're not being transparent about, to get the things that you need. You know, I know that what happens in jail absolutely impacts what goes on in our communities, in our families, and it affects our quality of life. The people have lost trust and confidence in the sheriff's office, and they need a proven leader with integrity to run the sheriff's office. One who is experienced, has the knowledge and common sense to bring safety to all of New Orleans. And that is me, Michelle Woodfork, number 6 on the ballot.
Thank you, ma'am. Constable Shorty.
Again, leadership is about taking responsibility, and the sheriff ducks responsibility. I've made mistakes, but I own my mistakes. I don't blame a jailbreak on my opponents. I don't blame the city council for every deficiency in the jail. She may have talked to former clients. I've talked to deputies, current deputies, who feel that they're not protected, who feel like the violence is rampant, who feel like their sheriff doesn't have their back. You elect me, and I'll have these deputies back every day and make sure that they're protected and that the inmates don't run to jail.
Both my opponents worked at a time 30 years ago in this jail when it was record numbers of deaths, escapes, people going out the door anytime. They do not understand this current jail. They've never been in it. They don't know anything about it. And they don't understand this consent judgment, which I do. And we are now within 5 paragraphs of getting this entire thing into compliance. That's real leadership. Yes, I am accountable for what went on, but no, I didn't let these people out the door. I'm going to hold those people accountable, and I'm going to tell that whole story. And Michelle Woodfork doesn't speak for the people of the city.
We are running out of time, but I think that that's a pretty strong allegation. So if you want anything to say to the claim that you don't speak to the people of the city.
I do speak for the city, the people of the city, because unlike our sheriff is touting to be the people's sheriff, I was the people's chief. I was in the community. I engaged in our community. I made a change in the department. Of course, she's going to come with the attacks, as my opponents do, who are 30 points behind in the polls. This is what they do. They come with all the attacks. They don't want to talk about the issues. They want to talk about personal things. They want to do personal attacks. But the truth is the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we do thank you all for your responses. Now, though, we want to take a look at some important dates as we do approach the election. The last day you can register to vote by mail or in person at either your registrar of voters office or the Office of Motor Vehicles is September 10th. You can register to vote online until September 20th. The early voting period runs from September 27th to October 4th, every day but Sunday.
And most voters can request an absentee ballot up until October 7th. Members of the military and voters overseas can request absentee ballots until October 10th. That is the last day any absentee ballot can be returned, and the deadline is 4:30 p.m. Again, then it is Friday, October 10th.
Now, the big date, Election Day, Saturday, October 11th. Polls are open from 7 in the morning until 8 at night. This is important. If you are in line at 8 o'clock, you will be allowed to vote. They must allow you to do that. We will be bringing you the first returns on election night as soon as the polls close at 8.
Now, our mayoral debate is coming up in 2 weeks. That is September 16th. We'll start once again with a pre-show highlighting the top candidates for mayor of New Orleans. That begins at 6:30. Our debate begins at 7 and wraps up at 8 on Channel 4, but the questions will continue on WWL+. You can just download the app for your TV and watch for free.
We would like to thank the candidates for joining us for tonight's debate, and we would also like to send a special thanks to the New Orleans Police and Justice Foundation for their help here with the research.
Certainly, and most importantly, thank you to the audience, the voters of New Orleans. Thank you for watching, and have a great night.